I think I've said it on the podcast.
I told you not to tell everyone your password. Hello and welcome to Outside the Fox, where we explore what's happening online and why it matters. I'm Kim Horcher.
My name's Ajay Patel, and today we have a very top secret topic. A topic that you probably haven't told a lot of your friends about. You probably haven't talked about it too much. It's probably annoyed you. You've probably forgotten many of them. You've probably reset a lot of them. That is passwords.
Yes. So, there's a lot to learn on the subject, like passwords versus password managers versus passkeys.
Yep.
I could certainly use some help, and for that we have a very good resource. Our special guest today is Steve Flavin. He works with Mozilla Firefox. He works on this channel that you are watching right now, and he's very passionate on the subject of passwords. Steve, thank you for joining us, and welcome to this side of the camera.
What's up, everyone? I heard we were talking about passwords, so I just decided to shoehorn myself into this episode. Hope you don't mind.
No, I need you here because I forget my password a lot, and I would like to learn more.
I have been weirdly obsessed about passwords recently, and I'll just jump into it. Like, I started at Mozilla about 4 years ago. It'll be 4 years in January. And as you would imagine, we take security pretty seriously. And so as part of our onboarding process for new employees, we go through certain protocols about accessing company accounts and managing our own passwords, and we're required to use a password manager, just as a company policy. Firefox has a built-in password manager, and that's a totally valid place to start. In fact, a lot of browsers have built-in password managers. It's a fairly standard feature these days. There are limits to storing your password in a browser, though. For example, if you want to log into your account outside of the browser, like if you're using a mobile device and you're logging into an app, you have to copy and paste your password from within the browser. Not ideal. So a dedicated third-party password manager is what our security team recommends, because it's truly cross-platform. No matter what device you're using, no matter what operating system, it's a much easier solution for cataloging all of those accounts. But when I started at Mozilla, like most people, I wasn't actually using any of those solutions. I had my own method for coming up with complex passwords that I would memorize. I won't tell you what my method was.
It's fine. You can keep that a secret.
Could you share one trick?
It was unsustainable, I would say. It's within a few weeks of starting at Mozilla, it was kind of like a New Year's resolution. I started in January, and I just decided, I'm going to audit all of my accounts and change all of my passwords and store them in a third-party password manager, right? The recommended one that we use, that a lot of us use at Mozilla, is 1Password. As you might imagine, that's a huge pain in the ass to set that up. It literally took weeks. And I think that's why a lot of us don't bother, because, the longer you wait, the bigger the project.
Yeah, it's often hard for me to motivate myself to do a project like this without a deadline. I'm thinking specifically of doing my taxes before the deadline, where I'm in a lot of trouble. So where does motivation come in? Do I just, freak out after there's a data breach?
In my case, it was something that was recommended by my workplace, and I just decided, that was kind of the inciting incident. Just hearing why it's a good idea from security experts, and just realizing, oh gosh, like I am not doing any of these things. If you're exposed in a data breach and those passwords are being used on your other accounts, that puts you at a much higher risk than if it's a unique password that is shared by none of your other accounts. And then, you go in and you change that one password and you call it a day. It's a much less stressful situation.
Steve, I am one of those people that you're kind of referring to, where I've been using the same password since I was probably 8 years old. I think I've said it on the podcast in a previous episode before.
I told you not to tell everyone your password. No.
Yeah. But
Believe
you see,
that.
It's I just try to throw them off track a little bit. So, Steve,
oh my gosh.
I have been someone that has been very not on top of my game when it comes to things like this. Yeah. I'm always opening up links. I'm always answering the spam phone calls. A lot of times this is kind of things, that advertisers, third parties are using to kind of get some more information about that. How do you avoid phishing attempts?
The harsh reality is you can't really avoid the risk of a data breach. Phishing specifically, I don't know, I guess it's just digital literacy. You just kind of get used to seeing those things. I honestly, if I get emails or phone calls from people that I don't know, I am more than comfortable just deleting them or reporting them as junk. Like having high standards of what you actually engage with and open up and click on. If it's not familiar, I think
stay
by
away
default,
from it.
Yeah, just being a little, just at the very least suspicious, or skeptical.
So what is the difference between passwords and passkeys?
Yeah, well, I'm really glad you brought that up because passkeys are theoretically something that should make all of our lives easier. In theory, they will replace passwords, and they're sort of a form of what we call multi-factor authentication. So we've all heard of two-factor authentication. Multi, even better. It's two or more things that authenticate your account. And so ideally it's three things, right? It's something you know, like a PIN number, something you have, like an authenticator or a security key or a text to your personal device, or something you are, which could include a fingerprint or a scan of your face. In practice, I personally haven't found it to be substantially more convenient than having passwords saved in my password manager, for instance, and I unlock it with my fingerprint, which is it's sort of the same thing. It's still something that I guess there's still the security risk of someone being able to find out your password, whereas you need those three things that we talked about in order to access your account. Theoretically, it's more secure because the likelihood of somebody being able to hack all three of those things, including your like literal fingerprint or face, it just reduces the likelihood that things are going to be accessed by someone without your permission.
Steve, I wanted to ask, we know about your transition from standard passwords, but what could the average person do to make this change easier?
I think ultimately you just have to set a goal. You just have to just kind of tear the Band-Aid off. And a place to start, which is not a bad place to start, is just with the built-in password manager on your browser. Mm-hmm. That's a perfectly valid place to keep your passwords. One thing that our security team brought up, which I thought was kind of amusing, a lot of us like to roast our elders for writing their passwords down in a notebook somewhere.
Yes, right next to the computer.
Right next to the computer. But the fact of the matter is that's actually not an insecure way to store your passwords. The likelihood of your notebook getting hacked by somebody, unless somebody like Ocean's 11 style like scales into your office and steals it, much less likely than, for instance, saving your passwords in a notes doc that syncs to the cloud, for instance, which you should never do by any stretch. Like the security of your iCloud account is not the same level of security as something like a dedicated password manager.
I keep my passwords in the Notes app. I don't write the password fully out, but I kind of have an abbreviation just to remind me of something. You
announce your password on a podcast that you're on.
So the point being, I'm in the Notes app, and that's very not a secure way of keeping my passwords. I have gotten an email about a couple of data breaches I have been a part of. Now, ever since you have started using this password manager app, have you kind of found yourself in any of those situations? And if you have, how have you dealt with it?
I have. I would say, a couple episodes ago, you guys talked about the Ticketmaster breach. I personally didn't get a notification about that. We actually have a product called Mozilla Monitor that is free. You could sign up for it with your email, and it'll notify you of a data breach. Even if you weren't notified by the companies, if you go in there and look at your account, it'll show you a list of data breaches where your information has been compromised. So it's kind of eye-opening. It's a little bit sobering to go in and do that. I recommend that everyone does that. I got a notification, this was probably a couple of years ago now, but MGM Resorts had a big data breach, and I didn't hear about it. I got a notification from Mozilla Monitor, you should change your password. And because I had just started implementing all of my password etiquette, it was a pretty easy process where I was able to go in and change my password, and it's isolated to that account because I wasn't sharing that password with any other account. Thankfully, it doesn't happen very often. So it's nice to have a protocol. So when it does happen, it's not this big disruptive event where suddenly you're extremely worried about potentially having compromised your other accounts.
Well, thank you, Steve. That has helped a lot. I'm going to have to make a difficult journey now into the world away from forgetting and remembering and sometimes losing my passwords. So thank you for enlightening us here today.
I believe in you, Kim. You can do it.
Thank you, Steve. All of you out there, please subscribe to the channel for more and download Firefox because you know it's the best. We'll see you next time.